Okay, hello everyone. This is Suzanne Rees, the study coach. Thank you for joining me for our Facebook Live session. Today we're going to look at why is it so difficult to read a case report, a law report, and how can you make the whole process a little bit easier? Well, first of all, you have to understand that reading a case report, a judgment is going to be difficult. It's been prepared by experienced lawyers, quite often dealing with a very complicated area of law. And the whole reason that the judges and senior courts have got involved is because there's a dispute between two groups of lawyers as to what the correct legal position is. So, by definition, case reports and judgments are not going to be simple to read. They're there for experienced lawyers and they're not really written for law students. But obviously, you have to read them to understand important areas of law. So, how can we make the whole process a little bit simpler and easier to understand? Well, first of all, you have to understand why you're reading a particular case. And I think there are four main reasons that there are cases that you have to read. It may be a case that is establishing some new principle or area of law. It might clarify the existing law, or it might provide guidance on procedure or the application of the existing law. And finally, the fourth category of cases is cases that are there to help you, guide you in helping you to value a claim in respect of damages. So they're the four broad principles. And before you start to read a case, I think it's really important that you understand which of those categories this case fits into. Why are you reading it? Is it because it establishes some new law? It's providing guidance? It's to value a claim? If you don't understand that, then you're going to get slightly lost. Now, one of the ways to make understanding complex cases and judgments in those cases a little bit easier to understand is by taking what's called a sort of bite-sized chunk of the problem. The first thing you need to do is to read a short, concise case summary. Therefore, you understand roughly what the case decided, what the main points are. Probably something no more than a couple of paragraphs. So really short, concise summary. Secondly, my advice is then think about reading a article or a discussion of that case. And quite often when a case has recently come out, there'll be various articles by experienced lawyers discussing the importance of the case. And that will help you to put it into context in the area of law that it deals with. So then maybe you read a short article, maybe a side of A4, just explaining the importance of this case and how it's going to change the law and what's its effect. Then you go to the actual case, and this is the judgments in the cases. So which judgments do you think you need to read first? Well, clearly, if it's a unanimous decision by the judges, go to the judgment that all the other judges say they agree with, and it's the leading judgment. And read that judgment first. And that may be 3 or 4 pages. If you've read an outline, then you can skip the bit of the judgment where it sets out the case and the facts and all that sort of stuff, because you already have a good idea of that. If it's a majority decision, again, go to the majority judgments and find the leading judgment from that majority and read that. So they are the two important areas that you're going to look at: the leading judgment, or if it's a majority case, the leading judgment in the majority. Once you've done that, you should be able to understand the case, its importance, its relevance, and how it's impacted on the legal profession. Now, having understood that, it's really important before you read a case that you understand the general principles of law that apply to that case. So if you're going to read a case on contract law about offer and acceptance, it's important that you understand the broad principles of that area of law before you read the case. So understand the broad principles of law relating to the case. Make sure that you read a short case summary beforehand, and then make sure that you read maybe a legal article or a journal article where they're discussing the importance of that case, so you can put it into context. Finally, go to the leading judgment of the case and read that judgment. You don't have to read all the other judgments. At the end of that process, it may have taken you a couple of hours, but it's better than sort of trawling through the whole of the judgments of every single judge in a case and not really understanding the context, the setting, and the important points. At the end of this process, you should be able to say, why is this case important? What happened? Why did the judges make the decision they made? And how does it impact on how we use the law relating to that area of subject? So it stems from that it's really important that while you're reading something complicated, you need to take a record. Either if you're a person who likes to listen to things, you record some notes as you go along. If you like writing, you write some notes. Or if you're a diagram sort of visual person, that you draw some diagrams as you're reading through the judgment. It helps to keep you focused and it keeps you on the ball. Now, let's see if we've got any questions. I'm just going to go to my chat box and see what we've got. Great, we've got one from Joel. Joel says, thanks, Suzanne, really helpful. I always get bogged down in trying to work out which judgment to read. Okay, Joel, now you know. Go for the leading judgment. All the judges will say, I agreed with, and whoever they all agreed with, go and read that judgment first. And, you know, you can skip the other ones if you don't have time. Great. We've got another question here. Sorry, this is from Jackie. Jackie says, Suzanne, why is it that when I read a judgment, I get lost as I'm reading and it never seems to make any sense? Well, Jackie, judgments are complicated, and it comes back to this idea that if you're reading a case and you don't understand the law in that area, reading a case and a judgment is not helpful. You have to, prior to reading this case, understand the very basic principles. So go back to your revision book and make sure you understand the broad topic. If I'm going to read a case on contract law dealing with performance, I'm going to make sure that I understand contract law, the essential elements, and in particular, the law relating to performance of a contract before I read a specific case that's important to that subject. It helps to put things into context and everything will make sense. Thanks very much, Jackie, for that question. Right, next we have a question from Tim. Tim says, thanks, Suzanne. Love the advice. If you don't have time to read a judgment, can you just read a case summary? Okay, Tim, lots of students have this problem. They have to read maybe 4 or 5 cases. They don't want to read the judgments of individual judges in those 5 cases. So they go to somewhere like Lawtel or Butterworth and they read a case summary. And case summaries are okay, and they're good as an introduction. But if this case is the leading authority, it's something that you're going to come back to in your work again and again and again, because it has like set down the principles and the tests to be applied in a particular area. Do you know what? Bite the bullet and read the leading judgment in that case, because it will stick in your mind so much better. Read the leading authority, and it will make applying the tests that they set out in the case and the context so much easier. Clearly, if you're short of time, read a case summary, but find some time to go away and read the judgment of that case so you understand it properly and its full context. And just a word of warning, sometimes you can read these very short case summaries and yeah, they get the broad general principles, but they're not good on detail because they're not meant to be good on detail. And where you've got a case which you're studying, it's going to feature in an assessment, it's really important just to go and spend some time and read the leading judgment in that case. Okay, we have another question. This is from Sam. Hi, Sam. I hope you're doing well. Sam says, thanks, Suzanne. One question I've got. What happens when you get judges who disagree with each other? Okay, Sam, this happens with lawyers. Lawyers always disagree. In any case, you're going to find either a judgment that's unanimous or a majority decision. But there may be dissenting judges who don't agree with the majority. And these dissenting judges, their judgments are important if you're trying to use the case to distinguish it from the facts that you've got. And it may be that there's something in that dissenting judgment that can be helpful. If it's made by a senior judge and they deal with a topic that's not the main topic the case is dealing with, which is obviously binding, if they deal with what we call obiter, so things that are supplementary, it's not the main topic that the case is dealing with, they might put forward an idea of how their views would be different if X, Y, and Z happens. If you've got X, Y, and Z and it's different to what happened in a case, you might want to use that dissenting judgment to help you distinguish this case. So it means that your client doesn't have to follow the precedents of the case that you've got, and you can say a court should come to a different view. So sometimes the views of the judges, the dissenting judges, the ones that don't agree with the majority, are important to read, where you're trying to distinguish that case from the facts that you've got and to say that your case is different and you don't have to follow the authority of the case. Thanks for that question. That's really great. That is so important to understand. Oh, great. We've got another question here. A question from Claire. Hi, Suzanne. Thanks for the advice. No problem, Claire. And Claire says, what do you do when you've read a judgment and you still don't understand why it's a problem? Okay. So what I would suggest, Claire, is that if you're reading a lengthy judgment, maybe it's 2 or 3 pages, try to break it down so that you're reading the judgment in sections and you don't move on to the next section until you've understood the first points that has been made by that judgment. So quite often there will be a series of arguments that they go through. Let's say they've got 4 points they're making in a judgment. If you don't understand point 1, you'll get lost at point 2. You'll be definitely lost by point 3, and by point 4 you will give up. So it's really important that you follow the judgment and work on breaking the judgment down into sections. Understand each point. If you've read it once and you don't understand the first point, go back, break it down, analyze it, reread it, highlight the key points they're making in that first section, and don't go on to the second section of the judgment until you're clear that you understand the first part. Once you've done that, move on to the second, third, and fourth parts. And that way you find that by the time you get to the end of the judgment, it makes sense. And so it's much easier, rather than just trying to read everything once, make sure that you're following the judgment as it goes along. I would also say that if a judgment is really complicated, it's probably a good idea to make sure that you've got a bit of silence, you're not interrupted, you're not got any social media going on, and that you can really focus for, a good 35-45 minutes on just reading that judgment and working through each and every point that's being made. And it's so good if you can make notes, do diagrams, whatever it is, get it into your mind as you read. You'll find that it's a little bit easier. Okay, Brian. Hi, Brian. Nice to see you. Thanks for sending me a message. Brian says, thanks for the advice, Suzanne. Great. What advice would you give when reading a case if at the end of the case you're struggling to understand what to do? Well, Brian, that's a bit like Claire's question. So again, it's the same thing. Think about how you're reading the judgment, slow the process down, break the process down, make sure that you understand each step. Thanks, Brian, for that. Okay, we're going to go to our final question, and that comes to That comes from Sabrina. Sabrina, thank you. And she says, hi, Suzanne, could you just go over the different types of reasons why there are cases? Yes. Okay. So one of the important things I said when I started out at this process is that it's important for you, before you start reading a judgment or a case in detail, to understand why you're reading that case. And cases are developed for one of four reasons. It's either because it's developed a new area or point of law. So is that the reason? It's clarifying an existing area of law. It's giving you guidance on how you apply procedure or some area of law. Or fourth, it's telling you how to value a claim in terms of damages. So each of those four different functions, if I'm reading the case because it's setting out a new area of law, then clearly I have to know the existing area of law. I have to be clear about how this case is going to depart into a new area. And that is helped by reading articles and journals that have discussed the impact of this case and its importance. If I'm reading a case because it's valuing damages in some way, I've got to understand how damages are currently being valued and how this is different. So again, I'm looking at a different aspect of the case. If it's giving me guidance on how to apply the law or procedure, well, I have to understand the procedure that they're talking about in the case in order for me to properly understand the guidance that's being given in that case. And if they're clarifying the existing law, I need to know the existing law, the area where it's unclear, why it's unclear, and then this case will fit in. And I think if you sort of do your background checks before you start to read the case, they make so much more sense and they have more context. So that's been us for today. I hope you've just enjoyed our bite-sized look at how to make reading a case report or a judgment in a case easy and simple. And I hope you can take some of the tips home with you and try them when you next have a case that you're looking at. Okay, I will see you next Wednesday for Wednesday webinars. Have a fantastic week and I will see you soon. Bye.